Hi, it's Red Recapped here. Today I'm going to describe a movie called The Devil's Backbone, which was released in 2001. There are some spoilers ahead. Let's start the movie without further ado. At the beginning of the movie, we are shown a huge bomb being dropped by a warplane. The movie shifts to months later in 1939. In Spain, a 12-year-old boy, Carlos, is being taken to an isolated orphanage by his father's friend, Ayala, and another man, Dominguez. Carlos lost his father during the Spanish Civil War a few months ago. It's the final days of the war, while Franco's fascists have the upper hand. In this secluded orphanage, the children of leftist, General Franco's opposition, are held in the lowest facility. They are hopeless about the future and only plan to survive. As the group makes their way through the orphanage, they are intrigued by a huge unexploded bomb that rests nose down like a sculpture. They are explained that the bomb has been defused by bomb squads. But it was left on the spot since it was too enormous to move away. Ayala and Dominguez are willing to meet the principal but want Carlos to wander around in the courtyard. The orphanage is run by Carmen, who has a prosthetic wooden leg. She lost her husband to Franco's fascist regime at war. While her personal assistant, Dr. Casares, elderly and self-absorbed, is in fact at the same level as Carmen at decision-making. In the courtyard, Carlos is shocked when he abruptly spots a child ghost in the building nearby. But when he turns around, the ghost disappears. Out of curiosity, he walks to the building cautiously. Just then, two lads, Galvez and Owl, show up at the door. Thinking the new boy might still have something delicious to eat, they ask Carlos for a candy or fruit which they are deprived of here in the orphanage. However, Carlos can only offer them comic books and toys, which are also amusing for them. As they are walking off, the pale ghost appears again, keeping an eye on them. It's revealed that Ayala and Dominguez are paid to bring leftist kids to the orphanage for their party's political purposes. However, the institution economy is broken. Mrs. Carmen offers the men some stash of gold bars she keeps in the building. Because it's useless in its form, not to purchase things, nor to disclose its existence to any outsiders during this shaky wartime. Ayala and Dominguez accepted it. Back in the courtyard, Carlos befriended Galvez and Owl as they swapped comic books with Galvez's marbles. Another boy, named Jamie, approaches them. He is skeptical about the newcomer boy and seemingly has a bullying personality. Jamie bullies Carlos by taking his comic book away and they get into a minor fight. Just then, Carlos realizes Ayala is about to leave him there alone. He becomes desperate and runs after him, but to his horror, they speed off. Carlos is left heartbroken and has his luggage torn apart. Dr. Casares and Carmen observe Carlos from a distance with a smile on their faces, telling that the boy is strong. Dr. Carmen approaches an unfortunate boy to fix his luggage and finds him an articulate academic boy who reads the book Count of Monte Cristo. Dr. Casares kept trying to comfort him, lecturing him that he should be patient as he would stay in the orphanage for a while. Carlos is then shown around and is given the strict rules and useful information about institutions by Mrs. Carmen. The kids aren't allowed to play in the building and they must take good care of their personal belongings. If something is missing, they will get punished with 2 weeks of extra task. Carlos is also assigned a bed, number 12. The last boy who slept in the bed was Sandy, who had mysteriously died. Curious about the numerous empty beds, Carlos asks the reason, to which Mrs. Carmen replies that some students escaped the orphanage recently. She then tells Carlos that the place is not a prison but has its own rules. Then we are introduced to the janitor, Jacinto. And his fiancée is Conchita, who works as a maid. Conchita has a dream of marrying Jacinto to live a romantic happy life on a small farm which she hopes they will buy. Jacinto is a former student who has spent 15 years at the orphanage in loathing. Since then, he had been constantly dreaming of getting out of the place. And that one day he will become so rich he will buy the building and wreck it. It turns out that he knows about the stash of gold hidden in the building, planning to steal it. On his first night, Carlos had a hard time sleeping. He notices a name scratched around the bed, Sandy. He surprisingly notices a boy's shadow on his bed's curtain, which freaks him out. But he finds nobody behind it when he checks. Baffled by the incident, he starts looking around, under blankets and beds, but to no avail. Just then, the pitcher automatically hit the ground and made some noises, causing everyone in the dormitory to awaken. Jamie and his minions berate Carlos for disturbing them. All the boys in the orphanage believe Sandy's ghost makes sighs, especially when they sleep. But Jamie denies that, telling him that Carlos is the one who makes noises to disturb them, despite the fact that he has just arrived. Since they run out of water, Jamie dares Carlos to sneak into the kitchen, where they are banned from entering, to bring water. Carlos agrees, but dares Jamie to accompany him. As the boys pass through the courtyard, Jamie whispers that he thinks the bomb has not deactivated yet. Because can be heard its heart ticking inside. On their way to the kitchen, they stop spying on Jacinto and Conchita when they are making love. Jamie visibly gets frustrated, since he has a major crush on Conchita, apparently because she is the only young girl around. The boys reach the kitchen and started filling up the pitcher. Jamie done his and walks off the building. During Carlos's work, the scissors fall down, blaring, which is overheard by Jacinto. He instantly grabs a shotgun and rushes to the kitchen. But Carlos manages to hide himself just in time. He instantly goes to stashes and tries some keys on a safe to unlock it, but to no avail. He leaves the building and unlocks the door. Carlos believes there is a ghost. So, he makes his way down to the cistern, asking the ghost to appear himself. In response, he hears a chilling whisper from an obscure source, says in a scary tone that many of you will die. Petrified, Carlos manages to push himself through the locked door, despite Jamie cheating and sneaking back to the dormitory. But the pitcher in his hand is slingshotted by Jamie's right hand, Buo, through the dorm window. It blares and soon Carlos gets caught by Jacinto. The next morning, at breakfast, Dr. Casares urges Carlos to give up the accomplices who snuck out with him last night. But Carlos rejects ratting Jamie out, despite his immoral demeanor, and takes the whole blame. But Dr. Casares outsmarts him, deducing that since the kids are hungry, the first boys who turn to look at him are Dirty Hands. Which Jamie, Galvez and 2 others do and are summoned by Dr. Casares right away. They get an extra task as punishment. Galvez praises Carlos for not ratting them out. However, Jamie now further respects Carlos, he still feels threatened by him. Jamie faces Carlos in the cistern, in the presence of several other lads. Jamie withdraws a knife to prove his superiority. In the ensuing fight, Jamie falls into the cistern. One of the lads warns others that Jamie can't swim. Carlos dives in to save him from likely death, while the ghost is also submerged beneath the water. Jacinto appears and breaks up the commotion in no time. He asks for the knife owner, which Carlos once again takes the blame of. Jacinto brutally cuts Carlos in the cheek as a warning, before threatening him into secrecy. The boys are all hurt by the violence. On the other hand, Jamie ends up trusting Carlos. Later on, Carlos talks with Dr. Casares, who is treating his cut. Carlos reveals he saw a ghost in the orphanage. But Dr. Casares tells us that it's a superstition while he is a scientific man. As a symbol of superstition, he then uncovers Carlos a preserving creepy fluid for aborted or stillborn fetuses, called the devil's backbone. He claims that many believe it carries a power that cures many ailments, including impotence. When Carlos is offered some, he is freaked out and rushes outside, still believing the ghost he saw is real. Dr. Casares then is seen drinking it, indicating he is suffering from impotence and also is not so scientific himself. It's revealed that Jacinto has a secret affair with Carmen while there is no love, but flesh. Jacinto then tells Carmen that Dr. Casares had always been in love with her even when her husband was alive. Jacinto also adds that, unlike her husband and Casares, who are into poetry, Jacinto takes care of the flesh. Mrs. Carmen wants to keep their loveless relationship hidden from Dr. Casares, who she admires as a gentleman. But it's impossible, since Dr. Casares is sadly overhearing their lovemaking noises through the wall. It is also clear that Casares is embarrassed by his lack of skills as a lover. The boys, who finally take Carlos as a confidant, uncovers that Sandy, who was Jamie's best friend, had disappeared on the night the bomb was dropped. From that night on, they hear sighing noises and they think it's Sandy's ghost. While most of them believe Sandy had escaped the orphanage in fear and had his throat cut to die. Carlos opted to locate the ghost one way or the other, after recalling the threatening remarks he had heard in the kitchen, whispering many of you will die. Later that night, he sneaks out once again, and soon faces the ghost. He is a pale, frail adolescent with blood flowing upwards from the wound in his head, as if underwater. The ghost chases Carlos back into the building, and a frightened Carlos has to spend the night hiding himself in the laundry closet. The following night, after examining Jamie's sketchbook which he took it from his locker when he was asleep, Carlos notices a drawing of a ghostly figure with the word Sandy written on it. So, he concludes that Jamie further knows more about Sandy's secrets. In a nearby village, Dr. Casares can be seen charging a man with a huge amount of money for 2 bottles of devil's backbone liquid. He then notices some leftist forces getting caught by General Franco's army. The doctor is overwhelmed when he finds Ayala amongst the protesters. They are told to look down and face the wall until they get a headshot, one by one. Once back at the orphanage, Dr. Casares persuades Carmen that they must evacuate the lads to a safer location, as all of them are in great danger from Franco's forces. On the other hand, Jacinto hears of the plan and faces Carmen, requesting the stash of gold. They insult and belittle each other until Dr. Casares appears at the door, carrying a shotgun. Jacinto discloses their sexual relationship in front of Dr. Casares in a caustic tone, unbeknownst that he already knows about it. Enraged, Casares turns a gun on Jacinto and forces him out of the building after he gets slapped in the face by Mrs. Carmen. As the orphans and personnel are ready to move out, Conchita finds Jacinto spilling petrol in the kitchen where he has placed many other cans of fuel and prepares to set it on fire. Terrified, she threatens him with a shotgun and shoots him in the arm while he is taunting her. Enraged, Jacinto throws the lit cigarette on the ground, starting a raging fire and escaping the place. Conchita warns Carmen and Casares, who instruct the children out of the orphanage before many gas cans in the kitchen detonate. Carmen and a teacher, Alma, try to put out the fire, but are unable to prevent a catastrophic detonation. Alma is swallowed up by the inferno, and many of the children are killed just as the Sani's ghost had foretold. Casares rushes to Carmen, who is mortally injured, inside the broken building, and stays with her in tears as she dies. Casares and the surviving lads, including Carlos, Jamie, Galvez, and Owl, stay in the charred orphanage. While Casares vows that he will never leave them alone. Later that night, Jamie eventually comes clean with Carlos about the details of Sandy's disappearance. Sandy and Jamie had been gathering slugs at the cistern, when they accidentally spied Jacinto trying to unlock the safe where the gold was stored. Jamie runs and hides, but Jacinto cornered Sandy and tried to intimidate him into staying quiet about what he saw. In a fit of rage, Jacinto pushed Sandy against a rock wall, leaving him with a severe head injury and shock. Jacinto, in a panic, tied the stones to Sandy with ropes before submerging the body in the cistern. A terrified Jamie emerges as the coast is clear and runs into the yard, only to find a bomb lands a few feet away from him. In a few seconds, Jamie explains that he isn't afraid of Jacinto anymore, and that if he ever returns he will be killed by Jamie. Conchita, who has survived the explosion, is making the long walk to the nearby village for help. But she is stopped by Jacinto along with two cronies, driving back to the orphanage to get the gold. Jacinto, who inherits General Franco's dictatorship, threatens her with a knife to express her regret for shooting him. When Conchita insults him, he mercilessly stabs her to death. Carlos meets Sandy's ghost once more, but he has no fear of him, since he hears the story of Sandy's death. Sandy quietly asks Carlos to bring Jacinto to him, which Carlos agrees. Dr. Casares eventually passes away of his injuries while still sitting by the window with his weapon ready to fire. Jacinto and his companions arrive at the orphanage and lock the orphans in a room while searching for gold. The other two men eventually leave in haste, but Jacinto soon finds a gold stash in a hidden compartment in Carmen's prosthetic leg, which overjoys him. Knowing they are likely to be killed by Jacinto, Jamie hearted other lads to fight back. The boys make weapons out of sharpened sticks and broken glass, and flee the room with the aid of the ghost of Casares. They attack Jacinto in the vault, stabbing him several times and pushing him into the cistern where they dump Sandy's body. Jacinto tries to escape from the pool, but is overpowered by gold bars attached to his belt. Sandy's ghost emerges from the deepest part and drags Jacinto to his death. Sandy's soul is finally able to rest in peace. After defeating the enemy and barely escaping with their lives, the rest of the boys leave the orphanage and make the long journey to the city. Dr. Casares' ghost observes them from the doorway. That's all from the video. Thanks for watching.